Look where this wood actually came from. I like to work from the house back towards where, or from the garden location to where, back to where my wood comes from. I leave big stumps, say 50, 70 centimeters tall, basically to seed with mushrooms later. You can see here's a bunch of them here. And what I've done is I've laid the rotten wood all down onto the ground. And that will give me lots of hugel to pick up later. Now when you find these long skinny poles, like wrist to arm size, about 4-6 meter, like this kind, they are perfect for that job of biocharing the hugel. And you know, when you find a mess like this, you need to just knock it down. And the gathering you want to do here is you want to leave all of the small rod on the fourth floor, so it's not worth picking up. Leave enough big pieces around to start rotting for your hugel and to help the fourth floor. And generally get your kindling from these petrified sticks that are not going to be bothered useful for indoor kindling. If you'd ever put something resiny like that in a wood stove, it creates creosote. And knock these kinds of fire hazards down. Really, every time you go through here, there's a few tasks. Snap off the dry twigs and get rid of them. And if you're going through at eye height, you know, this is a bad practice here. Don't leave this kind of thing. Cut it right off at the stump. Then nobody can ever jam their eye into it. Anyone that's been in the woods knows that that's going to happen to you sooner or later. And so here's the path back towards the house. And if you notice, I've left a corridor that I can walk straight up here, so I can take these longer pieces and lay them like that when I'm stacking them up to haul out, and then I'm just going straight without having to spin them around in this area. This area is now clear enough that I could spin them around, but keep an eye on that when you're stacking them up. Make sure you're aiming them in a direction, making them easier to haul. So all of this here will, I don't want to hurt the moss, and I don't want to take down any of these big spindly ones, but if I take too many of these weak ones, and even some like this, I will be cutting the amount of wind protection. So I don't want to ever take them all down at once. I want to take down basically enough to get to the ground to start the rotting process. And I want these hangers down, but I do not want a tree like this, which has a nice top, to get blown away because it has no wind protection. I'd rather that one somehow bloom out and get bigger. Now once they're that tall, that's probably a great timber tree. I'm not going to be cutting that for wood. I wouldn't cut anything for wood that I have to quarter. I would only use things for wood like this that are approximately, you know, firewood size to begin with, and a softwood that when dried is more than good enough, better than birch. I save my hardwood for lumber and for carving, and I don't see any reason to ever burn it. So this is the way you get started on a food forest. Over time, all this leaf litter here, I may use some of it for mulch, but I'll probably mostly leave it here. And I'm going to let the hardwoods stay in place and try to grow bigger. And the softwoods, if they're dead, they're standing only for wind cover. I'll take them down as the other trees become more robust. And I'm looking for areas like this. It's all full of skinny poles that I can thin them out. You see already they're waving in the wind. But they do provide a fair bit of cover from the nor'easters coming in this way. So if I want to keep these, I better not cut too many of those. Cutting too many in one year is a big amateur mistake in forestry. It's not about looks. It's really about your windrows. You should never cut a thing unless you've looked at the windrows and have a good idea where the winds come from and when. Now, as to getting this stuff onto the ground, you know, these things aren't very heavy. They're rotten. So if I have to get that rotten one there right on the ground, really as simple as just grabbing it, moving it. It has basically no weight. So I'll finish playing pickup sticks here. But again, as you get these petrified big poles out, aim them towards where you're going to be hauling them. Likewise for the big logs. It's just so much easier to do, and there are hauling tools, grippers you can grab logs with to pull out. I highly recommend those. And I do everything with manual tools. I do not come in here with a running chainsaw thinking when's it going to run to gas or oil. I come in here with a handsaw. I break things off by hand. I stomp them by foot. I get to know the area. And when I come in with a chainsaw, it's typically an electric, which gives me very, very good instant stop control. And then I'm only going to cut what I need to, that I've already sure is not going to affect the wind characteristics too much. And it's basically, I'm going to come in here to do things like knock something like this down, cut it in a few places there, and get it closer to the ground. So even on something like this, there's probably lumber wood in that stump, or something I can turn into a bench or the structure of a hugel. So I never cut this kind of big stuff down into like firewood lengths, like 8 feet. I'll leave it as long as I can, and somebody will be able to use it for some kind of a pole, or in a dock, or possibly for lumber, like a big one like that when it goes. And if they've been standing dead for no more than a year or two, they would be perfectly good lumber trees. And they're basically drying out nicely up there, so really that stand is kind of my standing firewood, efficiently stacked, if I want to think of it that way. Those are about the size I would use. So when you're managing your forest, don't think in terms of clear cutting. If you can avoid it, you'll lose this kind of nice mossy floor and all this beautiful sort of variety, and you won't be able to grow mushrooms, and you'll be costing the animals too much habitat. So I'm going to leave this a fairly closed-in clearing, and one of the most important things is to leave the stumps fairly big and let them rot. They are going to provide good mushroom medium, especially if I don't let too much sun in here. Now, as I mentioned, you always want to cut off any spears, spruce spears or whatever you might see on a tree by the path that you're walking by. Make sure those are smooth-sided, especially when you're walking around tired in low light conditions. And another benefit of big stumps is you don't trip over them. They're basically knee height, or thigh height. So here